Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this fellow seminar on the Rajya Sabha Search for Relevance in India's Federal Democracy. I want to acknowledge our esteemed panelists, Mr. Manish Tiwari, Member of Parliament of the Indian National Congress, Lok Sabha. Ms. Sudha Pai is here, retired Professor of Political Science at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Mr. Sujit Kumar, Member of Parliament, Bharatiya Janata Party, Rajya Sabha, will be joining us a little bit later. We've had a lot of interest from participants for this seminar, which really goes to show how relevant it is and how it remains a topic that is not discussed or debated enough, even though it affects us all as citizens. It also underlines the necessity for having more space for dialogue on democracy and on federalism. And to have two representatives of the upper house and lower house here to engage on these issues is what makes our democracy, despite shortcomings, continue to hold us together. Before we begin, I'll establish the flow of the discussion. I will hand over to Niranjan and Amber, my colleagues, for their presentation on the research paper, which has brought us all here for this discussion. After that, we will have interventions from our panelists, and then we will be opening it up for all of you to come in for an open discussion and Q&A. Before we do that, I just want to bring out that this paper is no doubt very timely, especially with the current discussions that we have on delimitation, on political representation, and of course, challenges to federalism. It is very well researched and detailed and also unflinching in its analysis. At the same time, it takes a balanced approach. It delves into history, especially to assess how the Rajya Sabha was conceived in the Constituent Assembly debates as a sobering house, a reviewing house, a house standing for quality, and how in the intervening years it has played a key role in shaping legislation and interpreting our most fundamental rights. The Rajya Sabha, as we know, has fallen short of its original mandate. The character of the upper house has changed in the last few decades. And for it to reclaim its original mandate as a venue for debate and for representing the interests of states within India's federal structure, it will have to address the changing composition of its membership and address the politicization which has taken deep root. The paper concludes with several recommendations for Rajya Sabha reforms and for strengthening its effectiveness. And for our discussion today, it will be most useful if we can focus on those ideas. I'm going to hand over to Amber and to Niranjan for their presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Sunena, Professor Pai and Manishji and my dear friends and colleagues. So this is something which we have been, Amber and I, we both are almost for last 2 years been working on different aspects of upper house. In fact, the first motivation was actually, it was initiated by IIC, in which Professor Pai was also there. She in fact had commented in the initial presentation which we had made. It was in the context of basically the changes happening in the federal democracy. So basically the contours of federalism, how it is transforming in the last 10, 11 years, especially with the return of one-party dominance. Because we had seen in the Congress years, especially first 30, 35 years, how the nature of federalism was in India and how center-state relationship was. It was quite kind of controlled kind of political system in which you had hardly any sort of regional parties or sort of or opposition parties was rather weaker. So it was dominance of Congress system, other thing which ultimately led to series of coalition later on. From 89 to till 2014 we had a series of coalition government, and that was the time when the role of especially Rajya Sabha took a significant day, because during the Congress year initial decades, Rajya Sabha was rather a ceremonial house. Although it was, conceptualized, which you'll see in the presentation, that as a, sort of upper house which will act as a check against, kind of the inherent majoritarianism of Lok Sabha, because Lok Sabha is basically designed as a house of majoritarianism. Whichever party secures the majority can run the roughshod. And so that's where I think there will be a check will come through Rajya Sabha. But Rajya Sabha was a ceremonial because Congress was in power both at the center as well as the state. So Rajya Sabha didn't have much role, but it acquired a very critical role during the coalition period, in which you have seen a number of bills. In fact, we are actually couldn't pass actually because Rajya Sabha stood the way for good or bad. So we saw the importance of Rajya Sabha then, and that was the time when a lot of people also started talking about what is the use of having a sort of upper house or another house which basically is acting as an obstructionist kind of chamber, delaying the bills of the thing, and in many cases it was actually genuine valid reasons, because so many important bills suffered because they couldn't pass the year. In fact, one of the most significant legislation was the 64, 65, amendments about Panchayat Raj, other thing that couldn't actually pass during the Rajiv Gandhi years in the in the Rajya Sabha. So I'm saying this was seen that sort of way. Then come to the 2014 onward, you have a different situation where BJP got absolute brute majority in Lok Sabha, and then you have seen increasingly Rajya Sabha, especially for past 10 years, was reduced to again more like a ceremonial lay. So we have seen basically how this is linked to one-party dominance, and that plays out. Although BJP didn't have the numbers, kind of a majority in Rajya Sabha, but because it could couple numbers, arrange numbers in different way through its own coalition partners, plus in other way. So that actually has also made this Rajya Sabha in many way ineffective body. So I'll Amber, can you run the first slide? Yeah. So you can easily see what I said is basically return of the one-party dominance, which actually makes it all the more relevant to look at how Rajya Sabha as the house of elders, house of debate, kind of to check the Lok Sabha's majoritarian impulse has acted all these years. So it is one way of mapping it, because we need to really understand what has happened to Rajya Sabha in last 10, 11 years. And then increasing sort of tension you are witnessing between the center and state, and a lot of things are being politicized, and federalism in many way other thing is facing a kind of renewed crisis. So in that sense, how the state's rights are actually being protected, whether Rajya Sabha is really acting as a sort of forum to protect the interest of state, because originally it was actually conceived as a forum of state to represent the state's interest, whether that has and what sort of transformation that has taken place in Rajya Sabha in terms of its membership, in terms of because we know now in Rajya Sabha you have now not only the domicile rule has been diluted, which has brought a lot of people can actually go from any other state and become a member from represent another state. But most importantly, it has become also a forum in which you have a lot of wealthy candidates are actually buying off and being there. So it's become a parking lot of wealthy billionaires, millionaires, and all that. So that in some way or other has its impact. But most important thing is the delimitations, which is now set in motion, which has been long delayed for several decades. But with delimitation now set in motions, it will be interesting to see how Rajya Sabha actually, because it will have an impact on Rajya Sabha. If the Lok Sabha seats increases, other thing, accordingly, this will also have an impact on number of Rajya Sabha seats. So that will actually already there is a huge asymmetry between Rajya Sabha seat allocation. If you look at UP, for instance, 31 seats UP gets, and 5 or 6 states in Northeast, they just get 1 seat, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Manipur, 1 seat. So it's a huge sort of inequity. So that will now get further, sort of enlarged. So these are some of the key issues we thought actually we'll look at from this paper. The next slides. Okay. So objectives are basically looking at its functions and looking at how federal relations has in some way or other impacted the functioning of Rajya Sabha, and then also looking at how it is performing as a role as an effective body or forum of representing the interest of the states. On these three parameters we are examining. Next, I'll pass it to Amber.
Dr. Sahu, let me just quickly move to the next slide. So what I'll do is I'll run you through the key points of our paper. So first, yes. So as Dr. Sahu has already mentioned, Rajya Sabha remains the key platform of some kind of resistance to the dominance of the Lok Sabha, especially when there is single party dominance in the lower house. Rajya Sabha is also known as a house of revision and also a forum for articulation of states' interests. So Rajya Sabha working as a forum or as a platform for representing the state's interests. So we also tried to make an assessment of how much Rajya Sabha has done in that regard. Third, as a second and permanent chamber, so Rajya Sabha is a permanent chamber as we know, it acts as a safety valve, offering checks and balances for greater executive accountability. And of course, it's also a very, very crucial platform for diverse talent and expertise. And the last point is, federal institution building. So, of course, it represents the federal interest or the spirit of power sharing between the union and the states. So I'll just quickly make a broad historical overview that we did in our paper before we went into more substantive discussions about the present debates. So basically, of course, India has a long history of having a more bicameral kind of a structure even under the colonial rule. Even in the Constituent Assembly debates, the rationale of having a second chamber as the upper house is something which is very widely debated. Of course, then we have some committees which deliberated on the idea of having a second house. And finally, of course, we ended up having the Rajya Sabha, which is primarily seen or constitutionally envisaged as a house of notables, a house of revision, and most importantly, a forum for the articulation of states' rights. Next slide. Coming to the powers and functions of the Rajya Sabha, so as we all know, whether the question remains that whether it's a house with a very limited mandate, and if it is so, then what is the relevance of Rajya Sabha in the contemporary political discourse? Of course, money bills can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha and not in the Rajya Sabha, and it also cannot be rejected by the Rajya Sabha. But on the on all other issues on non-financial bills, the Rajya Sabha enjoys equal powers with Lok Sabha, and it can also veto the passage of any such bills. The union budget is also placed in both the houses of the parliament. Rajya Sabha members are also included in all the key financial committees of the parliament. However, the Rajya Sabha does not possess any authority to form or dissolve the government. So that's one of the limitations of the Rajya Sabha as being an indirectly elected house. Some more on the functions. Rajya Sabha's importance becomes extremely significant when, of course, the ruling party lacks a majority in the Rajya Sabha because there, a lot of room is created for coalition building, understanding across party lines. Regarding the constitutional amendment bills, the Constitution mandates that such a bill must be passed by both houses with a specific majority. So Rajya Sabha is also a very equally important partner in terms of passing of constitutional amendment bills. Many other functions of the Rajya Sabha, like impeachment of the president, vice president, indictment of the judges of Supreme Court and High Court, Rajya Sabha becomes very important. And of course, since it's a permanent house, also it becomes quite crucial when the Lok Sabha is dissolved. Rajya Sabha also has, we all know this, special powers to declare any state subject as a matter of national importance and also power to declare the All India services. So not getting into these details. Yeah, next slide. The ruling governments have not held a majority in the house of in the house for approximately 40 years. So there has been a very long span of time when Rajya Sabha functioned without the ruling regime having a majority. And of course, Rajya Sabha has also played a very important role in providing some kind of checks and balances within the legislative process. For example, it has stalled many of the key contentious legislations which were being pushed through the Lok Sabha. In several cases, it has also played a very positive role in actively asserting its influence to push some of the very key and significant legislations. Moving on, of course, when there are several instances when the governments have used Lok Sabha to rush bills without proper deliberation. In such cases, Rajya Sabha has been a very, very helpful and significant kind of a chamber where the bills were not only vetoed, but also there were also created room for more deliberation and debate in the Rajya Sabha before those bills got passed. Of course, it has passed many significant bills in the last several decades. Quickly moving on. So, what are the major areas of concern with the functioning of Rajya Sabha? The first charge against Rajya Sabha is, of course, that Rajya Sabha is to a large extent imitating or emulating the problems that we face in the Lok Sabha, which is the idea that it is becoming an obstructionist house, where it is stalling the proceedings of the house, it is not allowing the proper functioning, no informed and concrete debate happening, and all of that. Also, if you look at the composition of the Rajya Sabha, increasingly it is also emulating the Lok Sabha in terms of the profile of the candidates, where the number of wealthy candidates are increasing. And of course, there are also a very serious charge of many of the members having criminal background or criminal past entering into the Rajya Sabha. For instance, as per the latest data, 31% of the members of the Rajya Sabha is having some kind of a criminal background or past, which is quite alarming. Though it is a provision in the Constitution to nominate the 12 eminent members from various spectrums of life, but largely these nominations are also becoming increasingly politicized in nature. These are some of the graphical visuals of how the working of Rajya Sabha is also has also decreased with time, along with Lok Sabha. So again, imitating Lok Sabha in many ways, and not for good reasons. And as already mentioned, the share of wealth among Rajya Sabha members, sitting members, is also increasing substantially. And the last visual is about the criminal cases against the Rajya Sabha members. So 33% of Rajya Sabha sitting members have some criminal cases, with 18% having some serious cases against them, which is quite a concern. So again, looking at the major concerns while we are winding up, dilution of the domicile rules, which Dr. Sahu already mentioned, that the idea that a member of Rajya Sabha doesn't need to represent, come from a state where he resides, is something which has diluted the domicile requirement, which is raising a lot of debates on both sides. Again, there's a very, very serious accusation against the government, against governments for a long time, that it kind of tries to bypass the Rajya Sabha by declaring any bill as a money bill, so that it can be easily passed to the Lok Sabha without by avoiding the Rajya Sabha. So that's also one of the key concerns about kind of suppressing the mandate of the Rajya Sabha. And finally, the way forward, there is also a lot of debate, a lot of discussion about whether we should reframe or rationalize the membership rules. So whether the domicile rules that the Supreme Court has mandated needs to be revised, needs to be relooked, is something that has always been a matter of debate here. And of course, how the nominated members are kind of selected is also something that needs to be relooked. Whether we need to tighten or kind of make the qualification requirements for Rajya Sabha more stringent or not, given in the light of the fact that there is so much of criminalization of the house that is taking place. Now, one of the key debate, and I think this is the most contentious and sensitive debate, is about giving more financial powers to the Rajya Sabha. On one hand, though, it might be making more sense in terms of empowering the state's interests, as Rajya Sabha being the house which is representing the states, but also it also raises a very serious concern about whether that's going to stall the financial functions of the government itself, if there is some kind of a discord between the both houses. Anti-defection law, which is again something which is quite a contentious issue, whether that needs to be also seen as an impediment which is curtailing the autonomy of the members of the Rajya Sabha, whether that also needs some kind of a overhaul or revision. And lastly, I think a point that Dr. Sahu already mentioned is whether we need to rethink about bringing equality in terms of membership in the Rajya Sabha from the states, right? Whether we need to have equal membership, or we are going to have what you already have is a mechanism where it is representing the state as per the population, whether which is a more viable framework that's going to empower Rajya Sabha. So these are the key debates. Dr. Sahu, if there's anything else you want to add, then we can.
I think Amber has captured most of the points. My just last point where I actually was trying to emphasize is to really make Rajya Sabha a house of constructive stability. In a parliamentary system in which the lower house has been designed to be majoritarian, and if you look at the trends over last several years, that the bills which the ruling government desires to be passed, other thing, it's just bulldozed, and you hardly see a kind of debate, which we witnessed. For instance, the classic case is the farm bill, which is so important, and those bills should have been really debated. And Rajya Sabha is where I think you would have seen, because you have more matured, reasoned members. But I think that sort of things didn't happen. So in a sense, what we are witnessing is that how to activate, in the context of the transformation in federal relations and one-party dominance, and the way kind of polarization that is taking shape, how we have to really transform, re-envision the working as well as the design of the Rajya Sabha as a upper house, which can really act as a house of constructive reason. So that's where I think our paper focuses, and we would like to also hear from the parliamentarian and academic plus audience, because whatever we suggested as sort of writer from our own limited understanding, but we would like to know, and please be as objective, as harsh as possible in your criticism or suggestion. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for the presentation, Niranjan and Amber. And I'm now going to invite Mr. Tiwari to present his perspective. And you heard from him. Please be as forthright as you can.
That's not a virtue that I can claim, of not being forthright. So thank you very much, Niranjan. And thank you, Amber. Mrs. Pai, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me congratulate you, Niranjan, and your colleagues, for being so persevering in your attempts to try and focus attention on certain very critical issues. But even before we come to the Rajya Sabha, I think you should do a paper, and a serious paper, how to make Parliament function. Since the 22nd of July or 21st of July, when Parliament started, except for a he said, she said debate on the kinetic actions between the 7th and the 10th of May 2025, the Parliament has been wiped out. And today in the afternoon, the National Sports Governance Bill has been passed. There are very, very serious questions about the legislative competence of the government even to introduce that legislation. And so therefore, honestly, we've become a two-horse democracy. So you have the executive and you have the judiciary. And legislators or parliamentarians basically are brokers between the executive and the people. The worst damage to India's parliamentary democracy has been done by the 10th schedule. It has taken conscience, constituency, and common sense out of the legislative proceedings. This whip driven tyranny has completely and absolutely subverted any quality debate on legislation, which is the fundamental role of Parliament. Because it is the business of Parliament to make laws for this country. And unfortunately, like many other countries, laws in India don't come with a sunset clause. So they can be in operation for 100 years, 150 years, 200 years, till the time somebody weeds them out because they have become completely redundant. At one point in time, I had suggested to the Speaker when we had a similar logjam that the House was not functioning. And it's obviously very disappointing when you actually think that you go to Parliament to discuss and debate issues rather than, mere sloganeering all the time. And the reason for that is, you see, there is no space for the opposition. Because government at times, or government mostly, and especially over the past 10 years, has been extremely cussed. And so I'd suggested to the Speaker, with one of the very senior floor leaders of the BJP present, that from 6 to 9 in the evening, on 3 days a week, there should be a discussion on a 193 or under any other rule on a subject of the choice of the combined opposition. In that manner, you will have a situation whereby you do a 0 hour at 11 o'clock in the morning, start government business at 12, do question hour at 5 o'clock in the evening, and at 6 o'clock in the evening till about 8:39, you have a 193 discussion. And in that manner, once the opposition also gets space, you will find that the House will start functioning. The Speaker was enthusiastic, but the government was absolutely and totally opposed to the idea. Right? Because frankly, when Parliament gets disrupted, nobody is happier than government ministers. And I've been on the other side too. I mean, when you are not accountable to anybody, you don't have to answer any questions. There is no debate which is taking place. So the happiest people are the bureaucrats and government ministers, because the fundamental function of accountability is not there. So I think the first thing that you need to really try and focus upon is how do you get India's parliament to function? Because going back now almost 3 decades, we have a completely dysfunctional legislative system. In the states, the assemblies meet for less than 3 weeks in a whole year. A budget session could be 3 days. First day given to obituaries, then a weekend, and the next 2 days given to a budget discussion in which papers also not circulated in time. So there is a need to bring about a constitutional amendment and ensure that at least in the bigger states, the legislature functions for at least about 100 days in a year. And in smaller states, at least about between 60 to 70 days. Because if you look at the functioning of Parliament, the first Parliament from 1952 to 57 functioned for 165 days. Now we are down to 60 days. And out of those 60 days also, the functional time is a couple of hours only. So basically, this great Indian democratic experiment is, as I earlier said, a 2-horse chariot now, being pulled by the executive in one direction and pulled by the judiciary in the other direction. So the legislature has completely abdicated its responsibility, one, because of structural issues, and two, because of their own conduct. They, frankly, I don't know, when you represent 2 million, 2.5 million people, and the way you behave, I don't know how people re-elect you and send you back. So yeah, that's the single most serious problem which is now confronting our legislative system. Coming to your thing on the Rajya Sabha, we are meeting in a time of unprecedented constitutional tensions. You've had a situation whereby the vice president of the country was literally taken by the ear and thrown out, and there has not been even a whimper of a protest. The second highest person in the constitutional scheme just ceased to exist one fine day. And then you have this unprecedented tensions between the election commission, which is supposed to be the arbiter of a free and a fair electoral process, and almost the combined opposition now. So we are in a time of unprecedented constitutional tensions. We are also at a point in time where the government is making a presidential reference with regard to the Rajya Sabha to the Supreme Court. In fact, I had taken this up way back in 1992 because the cycle, electoral cycle in Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir and Delhi has now been disrupted, almost going back 3 decades because of long spells of president's rule. The difficulty is that the constitutional article says as nearly as 1/3. So even if 7 people from Punjab get elected together, or 3 people from, I welcome my colleague, I'm sorry. So and even if 3 people from Delhi get elected together, or 6 people from Jammu and Kashmir is elected together, as long as you're making that 87 or 88, which is 1/3, the requirement of the constitutional article is met. So therefore, if the government ends up making that presidential reference, I think it will also give the Supreme Court a chance to maybe look beyond the immediate questions which get framed. With regard to whether we should have a second federal chamber, this debate actually goes back to the inception of the Indian Constitution itself, because it's very interesting. If you look at it, after the Cabinet Mission Plan, India was supposed to be a federal state. So except for defense, communications and external affairs, everything was supposed to be with the states. 3rd of June, 1947, the partition of India is announced. 5th of June, 1947, the Union Constitution Committee and the Union Powers Committee, they jointly meet, and the pendulum swings 180 degrees and you become, a strong centrist state rather than a federal state because of the circumstances in which India's partition had taken place. Now, a federal second chamber was very, very strongly opposed by Shibin Lal Saxena, by the other gentleman who was there at that point in time, by Loknath Mishra, that, what really is the use of actually having a federal second chamber. And those questions which were raised at that point in time were never substantively answered. In fact, as Loknath Mishra very rightly said, that out of 300 odd people who made up the Constituent Assembly, there were hardly 30 odd people who used to take an active part in the drafting and the formulation of the Constitution. So, which actually is the case even now. If you look at the active members in either house, if the house functions, would be 10, 15, 20 in both houses, I mean, respectively. That's broadly the number of people who take parliament seriously. The rest perhaps come for a walk. The other issue is this, and this is actually very significant: the dilution of the domicile clause. There's 3.1 of the representation of people's rules, 3.1 of the RP Act, which was amended in 2003 to do away with domicile. I mean, essentially the argument was that when people do dodgy down domicile, right, so might as well do away with it. But Mr. Kuldeep Nayyar challenged it in the Supreme Court, and a 5-judge bench of the court repelled that challenge. I think there's a serious need. If you really think that this is a council of states, to bring back the domicile clause and make the domicile clause stringent. It should not be that some money bags can, go to any state of the country, get registered as an elector, and come back elected. That defeats the very purpose of why you have a council of states. The other thing is, which is a reform which will not happen because, even delimitation is so contested now. I do not see as to how this delimitation will actually go through beyond a gerrymandering of constituencies within the respective states. Is actually, if you want a council of states, then there should be equal representation from each state, irrespective of what the size of the state is. A Sikkim and a Uttar Pradesh should have the same representation. Then you become an effective council of states. You see, with this proportionality, that the number of members would be an equation or a denomination of the total population of that house, you are really mirroring the Lok Sabha. You've not created a federal second chamber in the true sense of the word. And then, you see, you look at the dichotomy. 24 states in India are unicameral. 26, right? 24. So 24 are unicameral, and which includes big states like Tamil Nadu, like West Bengal. It's not as if there are small states which are unicameral. These are big states. So, honestly, if 24 of your states are unicameral, it really is a question that we must apply ourselves to seriously too. Why do we need a federal second chamber then? I mean, I know I may be, cutting off my own retirement plans by saying that, but be that as it may, see, the only real argument is that it's a house which is in perpetuity. I mean, that can be taken care of by amending Article 83(2) to say that the Lok Sabha will continue till the time the next Lok Sabha does not come into existence. So the perpetuity question, where the permanent house gets taken care of, that's really neither here nor there. So under those circumstances, this is a great academic discussion, and maybe you are planting the seeds of something which may germinate a decade or 2 decades later, like my intelligence bill, which was moved in 2011, and it is still hanging fire because I move it every time when I come back to the Lok Sabha. But there are certain ideas which you just need to keep them in play. And under those circumstances, I think this is a very, very good initiative that you've taken. I want to congratulate all your colleagues. And at some point in time, when there is a broader discussion on structural reforms in India's democratic polity, all this academic and intellectual work that you've done will really come in handy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing those views. You, of course, underlined how imperative it is first to address the question of making the parliament function. You also took on some of the recommendations that the paper has also addressed, which is the dilution of the domicile, equal representation of all states, and how we should be thinking of those issues. But you also asked a question which is perhaps very relevant. Do we need a second chamber? And thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for joining us. If you can address that and also share your views.
My sincere apologies for being late. There was a whip in Rajya Sabha, so I couldn't escape it. That's the only reason for my being late. Okay. We do need a second chamber because otherwise I will be jobless. So, well. No, I mean, with due respect to my very senior colleague and very erudite Manish Tiwari ji, I do feel that there is a need for second chamber, and this discussion continues from 1947 during the Constituent Assembly. By the way, Manish ji, Loknath Mishra later on changed his mind. In the initial days, he was against the second chamber, but later on, he subscribed to the view that we need a second chamber. But there were equally, capable and competent members like K.T. Shah and Mohammad Tahir and Saxena, you did mention, who were against having a second chamber. On the other camp, you had people of as eminence as Dr. Ambedkar himself and Alari Iyer. Sorry, I'm forgetting. Gopal Swami Iyengar and all. So I'm glad that this group, this latter group, had their day and their say, because now we have a second chamber. I'll quickly address the two issues, concerns that you raised regarding the domicile. Yes, I think it's a serious affront on the very purpose of the second chamber as a body that represents the aspirations and goals of the state. In the federal structure, when we argue that we need a second chamber, how can you have a member who is not a permanent resident of the state, nor a domicile in the state, and is representing the interest? Because that person will probably not have the best interest of the state in mind, will not be able to reflect the aspirations of the people of the state in the chamber, and we have seen that, and precisely this has been the case. Money bags have now been parachuted from different states wherever the party wants them to come from. But that apart, I think that there are many reasons why we do need a second chamber. Most importantly, because there are people in this country who may not want to come into electoral politics, who may be unwilling to come into electoral politics or unable to win elections. A typical example, we have a Sudha Murthy in the house today, precisely because we have a second chamber. Whenever there's a discussion on children issues or on the power of storytelling, who better than Sudha Murthy to address the house? Tomorrow we'll be discussing the anti-doping bill, and we have P.T. Usha in the house, in the Rajya Sabha. When a P.T. Usha speaks, she carries the gravitas, she carries a lot of weight of decades of experience in the sporting world. So, and I can go on, and we have had members of eminence as Dr. Singh, who was the Prime Minister of this country for 10 long years. Had it not been for the Rajya Sabha, probably we would not have Dr. Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister. He lost from South Delhi, supposedly the most educated constituency in this country, right? Arun Jaitley, people like who lost from Amritsar. So, and I believe that they have immensely added to the public discourse, to the quality of our debate, discourse in the parliament, and to the general polity, Indian polity. So we need a second chamber because we need expertise. Tomorrow, let's say we have discussion on dam safety bill. Okay, just to give an example, probably we'll have a member in the house who is an expert on dam safety. During Operation Sindoor, we had Ujjwal Nikam speak on the technical aspects of the trial of the 26/11 and the 1993 Bombay blast case. So I strongly believe that there is a need for a second chamber. Because we are a federal structure, which is part of the basic structure as well. And how else would you represent the aspirations and the need of the states had it not been for a second chamber? Now, I would disagree with my colleague Manish Tiwari ji when he argues that the membership of the Rajya Sabha should be based on should be uniform across the state, irrespective of the population or size of the state, as is the case in the U.S. Senate. Now we have states like Sikkim, which sends 1 member to the Rajya Sabha. We have state like UP, which sends 41 members to the Rajya Sabha. Now the population of Sikkim and there are some union territories, including Chandigarh, which Manish Tiwari ji represents, which has no representation in the Rajya Sabha.
My private
Member bill. Yes. So in not only Chandigarh, but also we have Andaman Nicobar Islands, we have Lakshadweep, we have Dadra Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, which have no representation in Rajya Sabha. When we right to equality is a fundamental right. When we argue that there should be one person, one vote, and mind you that the members of Rajya Sabha are not nominated. We are not nominated, barring the 12 members who are nominated by Honorable President. The other members, including myself, we are elected. Of course, indirectly elected, not elected directly by people, but elected by the elected members of the State Assembly. So, in an indirect way, that one person, one vote is reflected in the election of the Rajya Sabha members as well. Now, when you have a Sikkim having the same representation as a UP, I think it's unfair on the people of UP, or for that matter, any other state, larger state, which has larger population. So to that extent, I disagree with my very, very erudite colleague. I would also argue that the special power being given to Lok Sabha today in terms of money bills or in terms of financial legislations should probably be relooked into. Rajya Sabha should also have as much power to introduce and to pass a money bill as Lok Sabha, because I think that will bring greater say on financial management, on financial matters to the states, because it's the Council of States. And I think in a complex country like ours, where you need to we need to legislate on complex issues, it's always better to have a second set of eyes, second set of ears, second set of minds who go through the bills, maybe to look into the drafting, to look into the nuances. And because Rajya Sabha is, at least theoretically, the House of Elders, at least theoretically, do I look elderly? I don't. But theoretically, Rajya Sabha members have years and decades of experience in public life, so they can, bring better judgment into. I'm not saying better than the Lok Sabha members, but fresh judgment, not hasty, not populist, because Lok Sabha members have to go back to the electorate every 5 years. Rajya Sabha members don't have that compulsion. So we can, we don't have to play to the gallery. We don't have to, take a populist stand. Oftentimes, the consents of the Lok Sabha members are restricted to their own constituencies, and rightly so, because they have been elected by people of that constituency. And our constituencies are huge. Typically, Manish ji, you would be representing what, 20 lakh people?
No, I actually represent much lesser number of people now than I did
in Jalandhar. Okay. Yeah. So,
from 2 million, I'm down to about 600,000.
Right. But typically, on an average, Rajya Sabha members, anywhere between 15 lakhs to 30 lakhs, or let's say 20 lakhs is the average. So rightly, the constituents expect that the Lok Sabha member who has been elected by the voters comes to Delhi and articulates the aspirations and the challenges of the constituency. Rajya Sabha members, at least theoretically, have the luxury of looking into larger state issues, national issues which are not necessarily restricted to a particular constituency, but which has wider ramifications for the whole nation. So these are very, very genuine reasons why we needed, or at least the constituent framers thought that we should need a second chamber, and need for continuity. Yes, I completely agree with Manish ji's suggestion that if you amend Article 80 sub 3, then I think 83 subsection 2, then I think that need for continuity, which is now one of the reasons cited for having Rajya Sabha, maybe done with. But it's a deliberative chamber, it's a reflective chamber, it's a chamber which puts a check on hasty legislation, on populist debates. I think those are very, very genuine reasons why we need a Rajya Sabha, apart from the need for expertise, the need for making it more broad-based and democratic. Why should only people who have the acumen to win elections come into the parliament? Parliament in a country like ours, should also have the benefit of people who may not and cannot come into parliament, but otherwise, are able to contribute hugely to the national project. So these are, I think, very good reasons why we need a second chamber.
Thank you very much. You have, of course, emphasized, which is really a very important takeaway, that the need for the second chamber is also to bring in people who cannot or are unable to commit to electoral politics and yet bring the expertise that our democratic processes need. You shared your perspective on the issue of Rajya Sabha introducing money bills. So we have heard from the practitioners, from our members of parliament. We will now hear the academic point of view from Professor Pai. I would also particularly like your perspective on the issue of equal representation, on which our members of parliament have disagreed.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to that in a minute. But I think I will be playing my role as an academic. I was asked to comment on the paper, but I will, of course, go beyond that and take up some of the issues that our eminent parliamentarians have also mentioned. It's true that the Constituent Assembly spent a lot of time thinking whether we should have a second chamber, and ultimately we do have one. I think the paper we are discussing looks at two aspects of the Rajya Sabha, and which is what I think is on the table for discussion, according to me. One is the powers and working of the Rajya Sabha. And the second is its role in our federal democracy. And that second part, I think, is extremely important, because in the second half of my talk, I would like to argue that there are strong historical and structural reasons underlying the poor representation of the states in the Rajya Sabha. I'll come to that. Now, when we look at the working of the Rajya Sabha, a lot has been said, but I think, and also in the paper, I think it falls into three phases at least. And I think we need to understand that the Rajya Sabha has changed over a period of time. The first 4 decades, you have the Congress Party, and it had a majority in both houses of parliament and in many states, particularly in North India. And on many occasions, the Rajya Sabha's position, influence was limited, because it obviously followed, the Congress as such. But on many occasions, it did show its independence. It suggested amendments to bills passed by the Lok Sabha, which were ultimately accepted, especially on matters which directly impinged on the states. For example, the Income Tax Amendment Bill 1961, Prevention of Insults to National Honor Bill 71. I could go on. And in 1978, it sought changes to the Constitution, 45th Amendment Bill, which were also accepted. It was also first in passing the law on untouchability, on what is the establishment of AIIMS as a hospital and so on. And as late as 2009, it was the Right to Education Bill was passed by it. And also the special powers of the Rajya Sabha were used on 2 occasions, 1952 and 1986. I think the paper goes into details. But when we come to the coalition era in the 1990s, following the collapse of the Congress and the rise of regional and state level parties, particularly in North India, since no party secured a majority in the general elections in large parts of the 90s, parties had to form alliances to form the government. And this phase saw smaller parties which had, regional parties which had small members in the Rajya Sabha being reached out by the Lok Sabha in order to be able to pass bills. So obviously, the Rajya Sabha came to have a more important, a far more decisive role and so on. This period also marked the Rajya Sabha to some extent as a channel between the centre and the states, which increased its importance. And on numerous occasions, the upper house shaped legislation and policies that protected the interests of the states. But politics did begin to play a role. But I think it has taken a much more central role in the 2000s. In the 2000s, with the re-emergence of single-party dominance of the BJP and the large majority it has enjoyed since 2014, there's been, I think, enormous politicization of the House, and I think some of it has been mentioned, leading to decrease of its independence and role compared to, let's say, the earlier sessions. The role of politics did begin during the UPA. I'm not saying that, but UPA was a coalition. Today it has become much more pronounced, and I think some examples have been given. Increasing political consideration in choice of candidates, including nominated members, designating bills as money bills to bypass the upper house. It's become a house of wealthy millionaires, billionaires, and there's auctioning of seats. It's heard. So money bills, so money power has become important. There's, of course, the domicile requirement, which is there, and the anti-defection law, which makes people subservient to party whips, as you just mentioned. Also, up to the mid-1990s, a more sober house was there, sitting and deliberating. It sat late, it finished work, and productivity, as the paper shows, was 95%. But in the last 3 decades, it's come down. Today, we also have legislative disruption, walkouts, boycotts, and also you see, that, as was mentioned, the resignation of the Vice President recently, the efforts to indict a Supreme Court judge, all have led to a lot of confrontation and politicization. Since 2024, the BJP now has a minority in the upper house, if I'm not wrong, with 98 seats out of 245 at present. But it's been able to forge strong alliances, which enables it to get bills passed without difficulty. In fact, it tends to control the upper house, if I may put it like that. Now, there have been 3 commissions in the past: Sarkaria Commission, the Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution 2002, the Panchi Commission Report 2010. All of them made suggestions for reform. Those are very similar to what the paper has just shown. The domicile requirement should be made more strict, anti-defection law should be removed. They also said procedure for nominating members should be changed, and so on. But no structural reform has been suggested. And here I would coming to the second issue of the importance of the Rajya Sabha in its representation of the states. I would like to argue that there are important historical and structural reasons for the inability of the Rajya Sabha to represent the states, and without institutional reform, at least I think this role cannot be strengthened. Here I would like to invoke the ideas of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar on states reorganization and the need to create balance within a federation. I'm sorry, I'm going out of your paper a little bit. And the equal representation of states, which was ignored in 1956 because of the violent protests, that is size at least, over linguistic reorganizations. So many issues remain unaddressed, and I feel are today impinging on our federation and also the working of the upper house. Prior to the SRC report of 1956, Ambedkar agreed largely with Nehru that large states as blocks in which planning of scarce resources could be done was the best method, because the economy was the most important. However, when he read the report of the SRC, he seriously reconsidered his ideas. In his pamphlet, Thoughts on Linguistic States, written in December 1955, he points out that the size of states varied disproportionately. 8 states with a population of 10 to 12 million, that is Rajasthan, Punjab, Orissa, Kerala, Karnataka, etc. 4 with a population with 20 and 40 million, that is Madhya Pradesh, Madras, Bengal, Bihar. 1 state with 40 million, that is Bombay, and 1 state UP with over 60 million. He held that size, economic feasibility, federal balance was ignored. What was his suggestion in this pamphlet? On seeing the SRC report, which I think would have helped after independence. He says you can create more than 1 state speaking the same language. That is, he said that Maharashtra, for example, could be 4 states. Maharashtra city state, Eastern Maharashtra, Central Maharashtra, Western Maharashtra. He was actually talking about Vidarbha and Marathwada and so on. And UP could be made into at least 3, if not more, states. In fact, K.M. Panikkar had said the same in his dissenting report in the SRC. And of course, also Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. In fact, if you read this document of his, he provided maps for all the large states, how they could be divided, and what would be their prospective budgets, that is their economic viability. It's a very, very detailed document. This he held would satisfy linguistic demand, size, governance, and representation. And the division of Bihar, UP, and Madhya Pradesh in recent years has been almost entirely along the lines that he suggested. Ambedkar argued that equality in size of states and interrelationship between them were critical. Size and balance, federal balance was important. At that time itself, he pointed to a north-south divide that would emerge as northern states were large, have greater clout, disproportionate number of members in both houses of parliament, giving parties in larger states more clout. the upper house, there would be no balance, he said, as the upper house does not provide equal representation to every state, leaving the smaller southern states and those in the northeast extremely unhappy. He also argued, and which has happened, that over time linguistic states would become more homogeneous and political conscious, and other issues would surface, such as size and governance and representation. He said there would also be fear that UP would play an important role. There would be suspicion and resentment. And he said Hyderabad should be the capital because it's in the center. Now, these ideas are relevant to the impending delimitation exercise announced by, you want me to finish up fast, by the central government. I've almost finished. The exercise could significantly alter, of course, whether we keep to 543 or we go on to what has been suggested, 848 or so on. The difference would be tremendous as such and would create that. At the same time, I do agree that the delimitation freeze contradicts the principle of fair representation. Because today what has happened is the average population per constituency has significantly increased, with some MPs now representing nearly 3 million people. So where is the question of one person, one vote, equal weightage to citizens and all? In conclusion, I would say that when Telangana was created in June 2014, the issues that I have mentioned did resurface and they were discussed. At that time, many suggested a second states reorganization commission, saying that now we are a more mature republic. Why not address these issues? Smaller states would help resolve the problem of representation in the Rajya Sabha also, of the states. At present, the Rajya Sabha lacks a clear-cut identity. It's not very effective as a second chamber today that deliberates on legislation, nor does it effectively represent the state. But no government is willing to make structural changes. So in conclusion, I would say there are deeper historical structural issues which involve the federal working of the Rajya Sabha. Without structural reform, there won't be much change, I think.
Thank you so much, Professor Pai. You, of course, also brought out the idea of linguistic states as proposed by B.R. Ambedkar. I'm now going to be opening this up to the room, and we have a sizable number of participants present. But before that, I actually wanted to ask you if you would wade in very briefly on the debate that we are having here on equal representation.
I think I would, and both the members of Parliament actually have also argued. Of course, Sujit ji had a different point of view, but I think overall there is a unanimity. That representation issue has to be handled because it is actually creating a major sort of disparities because. Certain states have massive voice actually, and that defeats the purpose of having a second chamber which is supposed to represent the voices of the states. So how does that actually helps in some way or other if a state just has one Rajya Sabha member and another state has 31? So in a sense, which brings to what Professor Pai said about this can be addressed only when we actually look at the deeper structural issues or the thing, especially the size of states. And that's where the debate is now also moving on delimitations. Why a state like UP should be remain in such a big size state? Why it cannot be, for a long time there have been debate that at least it should be split into 4 or 5, like Mayawati herself had proposed. So I'm saying these issues also need to be addressed because otherwise, whatever you may do, whatever kind of minor changes we might do, maybe on domicile or including membership in terms of nomination of the thing, that will not really improve the impact of Rajya Sabha as a sort of a chamber representing states unless you have the structurally. So I think even if not equal representation, at least we have to bring some sort of rationality. In a sense, we have to bridge that gap actually, which is so huge. And one way of doing that is, break the states which are too large and they have massive political influence in the not only functioning of the parliament, also in overall democratic polity. Look at the electoral politics. Actually, these 4-5 states completely sway the elections.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes more for this discussion, and it is now open to everyone. Please raise your hand, briefly introduce yourself, and if you have a question for our panelists, or if you have any insight to share.
Hi, I'm Yash. I'm a LAM fellow. I have a question with you only, Sujit sir. So you said that a lot of times Rajya Sabha serves as a place for like people who don't want to be part of the electoral politics to represent and be a parliamentarian. And then you referred to nominated members like Sudha Murthy if we are having some like issues relating to children's and stuff. But then we have three Rajya Sabha nominated members who took oath at the starting of this session: Harshvardhan Shringla, Ujjwal Nikam, and C. Sadanand Master. All three of them went on to join BJP. Yeah, but three of them went on to join the Bharatiya Janata Party, and that increased the numbers of BJP to 102. So don't you think the nominated seats also, which brings in people from across the domain and gives them a seat at the table, is being politicized in the recent time?
Nominated. Well, by the way, I also referred to Dr. Manmohan Singh and also Sri Arun Jaitley. They were not nominated, they were elected members. All the four names that you cited, they were brought into Rajya Sabha not because they would join BJP at a later stage, but because each of them has individually achieved substantially. Okay, Dr. Jain or Ujjwal Nikam or Harshvardhan Shringla or Sadanand. Each of them is almost an institution. Okay, so that's the reason why they were brought into the Rajya Sabha through the nomination process, and that's the sole objective of the nomination, route. Now they decided to join BJP subsequent to their oath. That's their personal choice. Constitution allows that. Within 6 months of their oath, they can join the party, whichever party they desire to. So I don't think they were, brought in because of that. Yes, they did have ideological affinity to BJP. That goes. One only. Ujjwal. C. Sadanand also. Okay, that in. Okay, fine. So yeah, but that does not diminish the or mitigate the importance of having such people in Rajya Sabha. That in fact reinforces my point that people like Dr. Manmohan Singh or Ujjwal Nikam, they have so much to contribute to policy making, yet they can't come to parliament because of the very nature of Indian politics, right? But I think Indian polity has definitely gained a lot from the presence of Dr. Manmohan Singh, an eminent economist, or will gain a lot because of the presence of these names. Hence, you need a Rajya Sabha, right? That in fact reinforces my argument.
Right. We'll take a couple of more questions.
Sir, actually, my question is for all of you. That your presentation shows that we have 33% criminal MPs in our Rajya Sabha, and still nobody thinks criminal cases. Sorry for that, but still nobody points out that how we can check and balance the ethics of MPs, and what we can do to reduce the millionaires, billionaires, and criminal alleged criminals from our from our houses. And the question mainly is that both the MPs, I'm not pointing out anyone, I'm just telling that they both explain very well, but they both avoided that topic, because they both have the criminals or what, I don't know. Just please explain.
With great respect, that's a completely erroneous and fallacious argument. And I'll explain why. Indian jurisprudence holds that you're innocent until proven guilty. Right? So therefore, the mere presence of an FIR, or for that matter, even a charge sheet, is neither here nor there. A charge sheet is nothing more than the best understanding of facts and circumstances as concluded by the investigating officer. It has no more locus than that in a court of law. It is the easiest thing in this country today to get frivolous, false cases registered against your political opponents. Central governments have been doing it, state governments have been doing it. Everybody is an equal opportunity offender in this case, right? Number two, you have to make a distinction, right? For example, suppose you participate in a political agitation. So what the police will do is they will charge you under 147, 148, 149, etc., from, writing deadly weapons to, obstructing a public servant to every other conceivable charge which they can find. They will level that charge against you. Now, does that make you a criminal? If you are fighting for your democratic rights or you are agitating for a people's cause and an FIR is registered against you under every section of the Indian Penal Code conceivable by whatever new name it is called now, does that make you a criminal? So this argument of criminality, with great respect, is a completely fallacious argument. Number two, yes, I can understand that if somebody has a very heinous charge in him. Okay, and a heinous charge in my understanding would be, well, the charge of rape, the charge of molestation. Murder also, you have fake murder cases registered against political opponents all the time. I mean, that's why I deliberately didn't mention murder, because, and it's not, limited to one government. Whosoever is in power, wherever, abuses and misuses the state machinery as much as he or she can. To your other argument about sending millionaires don't matter these days, billionaires to the Rajya Sabha, that is a serious issue. That is really a very serious issue. That's something which needs to be dealt with, because people shouldn't be there just on the dint and strength of their money. They must bring something to the table more than that. You see, a far more serious issue was raised by my colleague with regard to the financial remit of the Council of States. And I can't understand, and I probably go and look it up, that why the framers of the Constitution in their wisdom decided to keep financial business out of the remit of the Council of States. Because, if you were creating a house of deliberation, reflection, specialization, then something which requires the maximum amount of circumspection and debate is the financial health of the country. Because fundamentally, money talks and everything else walks. And if that one aspect, which is perhaps most critical to the functioning of any country, or for that matter, even any household, why keep that out of the remit of the Council of States is something I think worth looking at in great detail. So sorry to disappoint you, but on criminality, my views are very different.
Yes, I was also adding, but go ahead.
In our sort of research, just to support what you said, when this entire thing about the second house, the upper house, was debated, I think the debate was happening in the context of, the just partition memory, balkanization of the country. And as you said, the constitution makers, they had almost 180 degrees swing in form of a more unitary kind of states, although they will have federal features, but it will be strong center. And that was the time when, some of the members suggested that, because country need to move economically and, the lot of financial and other decisions have to be taken rapidly. So let the power be with Lok Sabha. And Rajya Sabha should have all other powers, but financially. But we have now in the 7 decades here, the country has really moved on, matured, and and matter of finance, which even Mr. Sujit Kumar himself, as a ruling party MP, said clearly that the financial power on that, I think there should be parity. because this is where I think a lot of often your budget is never discussed in Lok Sabha. It's because most of the time you have disruption and other things, so it's passed in the milieu of disruption and all that. So important allocation and many things that happens. Probably second chamber, the House of Elders can actually have more time, and they can probably, because they're more matured people and a lot of them come from expert background, can probably pay. Yeah, so they are in many ways they are deprived actually, because they can't have any suggestion or anything or any sort of vote on the bill. So I think that's something probably needs a serious.
Why shouldn't nominated members then be members of the Council of Ministers? See, there is a unwritten rule that nominated members will not be taken into the Council of Ministers. If you are bringing in specialists, right, who are domain experts, then if they can't contribute to the functioning of the executive, where they possibly will be more useful than just giving advice in the Council of States, I mean, that is also a bar which is neither here nor there.
Dr. Rajat Manna was in the PMO, Minister of Science.
For a short while, when I think the VP Singh and then Chandrasekhar's government was there. Very short.
Right. And to just actually conclude that point, our remit for this discussion was not criminalization of politics. We are here to look at Rajya Sabha reforms and strengthening of federalism. And to be fair to our members of parliament, they have been very candid in taking that on. We'll have time for one more question. Maybe let's...
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. I am a research intern at Shri Sujit Kumar sir's office. And my question will circle back to the question of representation. As ma'am mentioned, that one of the ways which was suggested is to divide the larger states into smaller states, so that the administration can be more easier. So there is one concern which I have in my mind, and I would just like to know your opinion on that. So I agree that maybe it is possible that administration can be made easier, but don't you think it will lead to resistance from the people of the state? Because already the states are divided on the basis of culture and language. So if we divide them, will it not create a resistance and communal clashes and disappointment among the people? So what do you think on that?
Sir, I have a question that why private member bill has not been passing from many years.
In 2014, Mr. Tiruchi, but it got passed in Rajya Sabha, not in Lok Sabha. That is the closest we have got to passing private member bill.
Hello, I'm Tejal. I have a question for both of you. That most of the time we have seen most of the member were contested for Lok Sabha. Recent example for Sunetra Pawar. She is from Ajit Pawar NCP party, and other one is Ujjwal Nikam. Both were contesting for Lok Sabha. Later they become nominated member in Rajya Sabha. So why these Rajya Sabha seats used as a political interest to maintain every party's political interest and to support their in different way?
Well, if you look at the way the states were divided, they were divided after a lot of protests asking for linguistic states. So if you look at the south of India, I wouldn't say all of them are absolutely on very linguistic lines. I mean, Karnataka can still be divided perhaps, but you have Tamil Nadu, you have now Telangana, you have Andhra, they were on linguistic lines. If you look at North India, you have large block states which do not have what one would call a regional identity of their own. To take up the example of UP, UP has, for example, a Western UP culture, and there's been a movement for creating Western UP, or what was called Haryali, I think, at one point of time. There is Awadh, which has a very distinct culture of its own, right from the Nawabs of Awadh, and which, if you were to go through UP, Hindi changes. and the way it is spoken in the Awadh area is different. Purvanchal is still very different. It has its own culture. And there have been demands for dividing, separating Purvanchal, and maybe at one time it was said maybe a few areas of Bihar could have been brought in and so on. Where Bundelkhand is concerned, it has a lot more to do with the northern part of Madhya Pradesh there. That is what is called Baghelkhand. And one of the suggestions in the SRC was that, you could take that part and you could take Baghelkhand and those northern Madhya Pradesh areas and form a state. That would have been actually culturally, and there was a demand for it. But eventually, this was there. So it's not just size, there have already been demands. For example, Uttarakhand was formed after a lot of demand. So was Punjab and Haryana. The long demand for a separate state of Punjab. So I don't think Ambedkar is suggesting, if you read the pamphlet, that you divide almost all states. What he's suggesting is those large states. And today, according to what he said, there have been demands for division of these states. Sorry, I have a bad throat. You see, it's not just a question of size and administration. Where the Rajya Sabha is concerned, if you have these smaller states, political parties would have less clout than at present. For example, UP has a very large number of members in the Lok Sabha. At one time it had 80. It is less now. So any party which gets a majority there, and a large majority as today, will be able to control large number of Rajya Sabha seats. So that was the idea, in which the suggestion that came from me, and which came earlier from Ambedkar as such. So it's not, I don't think there would be people's resistance. There was a demand in Madhya Pradesh. In fact, in the SRC, there was a demand by Jaipal Singh for a cultural state of Gondwana, which was the tribal areas. So there are various ways of looking at this and doing it. Thank you.
This whole business of the reorganization of India, unfortunately, has been so contested that I do not know whether it is wise to any longer open that Pandora's box. Because if you look at the partition of India, there was no partition of India. There was a partition of two states of India, Punjab and Bengal. Right? Punjab suffered the most, and Bengal, to a certain lesser extent. But yes, you're right, Bengal was partitioned twice, 1905 and then again in 1947. But imagine, if, let us suppose, the partition of India wouldn't have taken place, the political weight of the states of undivided Punjab and the undivided Bengal would have been of a different order altogether. The center of gravity would not have been the Hindi heartland. The center of gravity of India, in terms of its political equilibrium, would have actually rested on the periphery of India. I mean, that's a great conspiracy which no one has gone into, but that's a subject worth deliberating about. Number two, then, you see, ultimately you had all these linguistic aspirations, and it's not essential that smaller states make for better governance. Look at what is happening in the smaller states. Look at where their debt to GSDP ratios are. See what has happened to Punjab. It's the second highest indebted state in the country after Himachal Pradesh. And so therefore, to make this argument that smaller states are better governed, there is absolutely no empirical evidence to back that up. Absolutely no empirical evidence. So I think we've opened enough Pandora's boxes in the last 75 years. It's just to kind of, give quietus to it and try and move on.
We might have time for maybe 2 short questions, if anyone has.
Hello everyone, I'm Raghav, I'm a LAM fellow as well. My question is to Manish sir again, because it pertains to constitutional law. So the constitution says that every minister must be a member of parliament. And the same constitution also says that the council of ministers are collectively responsible to the parliament. My question might sound rhetorical, or it might be a little more philosophical. Do you think there is a structural problem in this? Because when we say that ministers are responsible to the parliament, I feel it's a meaningless statement because ultimately the same party that rules, they have the majority in the house as well. So my question, I'm also, I'm a lover of constitutional law and its philosophies. So we can see that Montesquieu says that in separation of powers, there should be no person who should be a member of more than one of the organs. So anyone who is a part of executive should not be a part of legislature. That is Montesquieu's theory. So my question is, do you think there is a structural problem in the constitution in the sense that all the MPs, they are also part of ministers, and all the ministers, they are ultimately member of either house of the parliament? But I hope my question is clear.
Interesting point, and actually you make a very relevant point that should you really have a system which is more akin to the United States system, whereby the executive is accountable in certain senses to the House in terms of how bills are passed or are initiated and passed, but that responsibility of the ministers to the House collectively is a bit of an oxymoron, right? So therefore, but that would mean changing the fundamental design of the Constitution. You see, the Westminster model that you adopted, that says that the government would be from the majority party. And so the government is from the majority party, obviously ministers would be from the majority party, right? Of course, Prime Minister can always take people from outside and, get them elected to the Council of States or even to the Lok Sabha. But that's entirely the prerogative of the Prime Minister. But you see, essentially, if your question is, has the time come to change the fundamental design of the Indian Constitution? This is again a debate which has been going on for a long time, whether we should go in for a more presidential form of government, would that be more suited to India's needs? But the only one observation I'll make is, when I look around the House, that is when it functions, and I see the amount of diversity that the parliamentary system can draw in and kind of make it an assimilative experience whereby the aspirations of almost every region in the country, get articulated in some form or the other. So to that extent, Parliament actually plays a very unifying role in keeping the Indian Union with its million mutinies, intact.
Sir, the thing that came in my mind while I was listening to your conversation is that will it not worsen the North-South divide if we give equal representation to every state? Because if we will have a reorganization of states on the basis of the on the basis of the dialect that is there in the state, if we will merge the northern areas of Madhya Pradesh and the Bundelkhand of Uttar Pradesh, will not that worsen the North-South divide? Because
how will that worsen the North-South divide? The divide already exists. What you're suggesting is that if you make smaller states in the north, it will become worse in terms of north and south.
Because, ma'am, the representation will be equal. So there will be, in that case as well, there will be more representation for the northern states in the parliament.
It's already there. What I was trying to suggest was that if we had smaller states, the clout that large states have in the Rajya Sabha would not be there because they would not have that many members. Now, how we do it and whether we do it and how we do it, that is something to be worked out. And if the northern states, you see, already the southern states are unhappy that the northern states have more. So if the northern states were divided, they would not have collectively the clout that they have today. That is the point. The South anyway has smaller states and has smaller numbers. But that's a way of, it will depend on how it's worked out.
Sorry, we won't have time
usually,
for a follow-up. We'll have to, yes, right. So the final question is from an online participant for you. And that is, in the interest of democracy, is it in the interest of democracy to nominate technocrats judges immediately after their retirement? While we may agree that it brings them expertise, but also raises ethical questions on nominations. From Sridhar Method.
To answer this.
But will you take that on?
But I will definitely. No, I totally agree with you. I think let's not get into the moral aspect of it, but I think we should have a bar on judges, civil servants coming into the Rajya Sabha. There should be, I think, a cooling period, at least 5 years. For sure, I think, but his party is to be blamed for the state of affairs that we have. Justice Rangnath Mishra was, brought into Rajya Sabha 2 years after he demitted office, and no political party is holy cow. So we see today many civil servants, judges, or maybe only one, but many civil servants come into Rajya Sabha immediately after their retirement. I think this is an unhealthy trend. It's not good for democracy. Certainly, I would like to see this change. And I would also contest the title of the seminar, Rajya Sabha Search for Relevance. What do you mean? We are already relevant. So, thank you.
Concluding thoughts that you would add.
Definitely, there's a need for reform, whether it's the domicile aspect or giving Rajya Sabha equal say in introducing and passing a money bill, or making it more relevant to reflect the aspirations of the state, because that is the primary reason why we have a Rajya Sabha in a federal structure. I think definitely, we can discuss how best to reform and make it more relevant. But I do think it's relevant. I do think in a country like ours, where states have or should have equal say in policy making, at least when it comes to matters pertaining to these states. I think definitely there's need for a Rajya Sabha. We can always debate and discuss and disagree on the quantum of relevance or the need for reform. But my considered view is that yes, Rajya Sabha has played its role, and over the last 70 years, we have definitely benefited. The nation has immensely benefited from the Rajya Sabha. Thank you.
Thank you to our eminent speakers for sharing their insights, for joining us today, and also for contributing to the vigorous and hearty debate that we have hosted at ORF. And thank you also to the audience for their enthusiastic participation. Thank you.